The gunshot that killed her husband still echoed in Sarah Coleman's ears 3 years later, though the sound existed only in her nightmares now. She stood on the porch of her modest home on the outskirts of Verde, Nevada, watching the dust settle on the horizon where a lone rider approached in the afternoon heat of June 1878. Her hand instinctively moved to the rifle leaning against the doorframe, a habit born from necessity rather than paranoia. Out here, a woman alone learned quickly that trust was a luxury she could not afford. The rider drew closer, and Sarah could make out the details of a tall man on a bay horse, his hat pulled low against the sun. She did not move from her position, keeping her stance relaxed but ready. The ranch she maintained was small, just enough cattle and chickens to keep her fed, and a small income from the eggs she sold in town. It was not much, but it was hers, paid for with her husband's life insurance and her own stubborn determination to prove she could survive without depending on anyone. The rider slowed as he approached, raising one hand in greeting. "Madam," he called out, his voice carrying across the dusty yard. "Name's Lucas Owens. I'm looking for work, and I heard in town you might need a hand with some fence repairs." Sarah studied him carefully. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that looked both tired and honest. His clothes were worn but clean, and his horse, though not fancy, was well cared for. These small details told her more than words could. A man who took care of his animal in this heat was a man with some measure of character. "Who told you that?" she asked, not moving her hand far from the rifle. "Mrs. Henderson at the general store. She mentioned you've been trying to manage the place alone." He shifted slightly in his saddle, and Sarah noticed he kept his hands visible, aware she was watching him like a hawk watches a snake. "I'm not looking for charity, madam. Just honest work for honest pay. I'm good with repairs, livestock, and I can handle a hammer and saw if you need building done." Sarah's jaw tightened. Mrs. Henderson meant well, but the woman talked too much about Sarah's business. Still, the fence on the eastern border had been damaged in a storm 2 weeks ago, and she had not had the time or, if she was honest with herself, the strength to fix it properly. 3 of her cattle had wandered off before she managed to rig a temporary solution. "I can pay you 50 cents a day in meals," she said finally. "There's a bunkhouse out back. It is not fancy, but it is clean and dry. The fence work will take about a week, maybe less if you are as good as you say." Lucas nodded, a small smile crossing his face. It was not a cocky smile, just relief. "That's more than fair, madam. I appreciate the opportunity." "My name is Mrs. Coleman," Sarah said, her voice firm. "You'll take your meals on the back porch, not in the house. You'll work from sunup to mid-afternoon, break during the worst heat, and finish in the evening if the light holds. Sunday is for rest. Those are my terms." "Understood, Mrs. Coleman." Lucas dismounted, and Sarah noticed he moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. He caught her looking and shrugged. "Horse threw me about 2 months back. It is healing fine, just takes time." Sarah nodded curtly and finally moved her hand away from the rifle. "Bunkhouse is around back. There's water from the pump by the barn. Supper will be ready at 7. You can start work tomorrow morning." She watched him lead his horse away, noting the gentle way he spoke to the animal, the careful attention he paid to removing the saddle and checking the horse's hooves before seeing to his own comfort. Sarah turned and went back into her house, closing the door firmly behind her. She leaned against it, suddenly aware that her heart was racing. It had been so long since she had allowed anyone onto her property, let alone hired a man to work here. The last ranch hand she had hired, a year after her husband's death, had stolen from her, and tried to force himself on her one night when he thought she was asleep. She had shot him in the shoulder and run him off her land, and the incident had only reinforced her determination to rely on no one but herself. But the fence needed fixing, and winter would come eventually, bringing its own set of challenges. She could not do everything alone, no matter how much she wanted to believe otherwise. Sarah moved to the window and watched Lucas settle into the bunkhouse, his movements efficient and practiced. She would watch him carefully, keep her guard up, and at the first sign of trouble, he would be gone. Her hand unconsciously moved to the locket at her throat, the one containing a small photograph of Thomas, her husband, taken just months before he died. "I am doing the best I can," she whispered to the empty room as if Thomas could hear her. "I am trying to keep going, but it is so hard." The next morning arrived with the pink and gold light that always made the Nevada desert look almost beautiful. Sarah had been awake since before dawn, a habit she could not break even when she wanted to sleep longer. She prepared breakfast, biscuits, bacon, and strong coffee, and carried a plate out to the back porch just as Lucas emerged from the bunkhouse. He looked better after a night's rest, his hair damp from washing at the pump. "Morning, Mrs. Coleman," he said, accepting the plate with a grateful nod. "Smells wonderful." "There's coffee in the pot," she said, gesturing to the tin pot she had set on the small table. "Help yourself. The tools are in the barn, and the fence that needs work is on the eastern side about a quarter-mile out. You will see where the posts are leaning. The whole section needs to be replaced." "Yes, madam." Lucas sat down on the porch steps, and Sarah retreated into the house, watching through the window as he ate. He did not rush, did not eat like a starving man, just steady and methodical. When he finished, he washed his plate at the pump, set it on the porch railing, and headed to the barn. Sarah spent the morning working in her vegetable garden, weeding and watering the plants that provided much of her food. The work was meditative, allowing her mind to drift while her hands stayed busy. She found herself listening, though, for sounds from the eastern pasture, some part of her waiting for something to go wrong. But the morning passed quietly, and when the sun climbed high enough that the heat became oppressive, she saw Lucas walking back toward the barn, carrying tools over his shoulder. He worked through the afternoon break, she noticed, though she had told him to rest during the worst heat. Stubborn or dedicated, she was not sure which. By evening, when she rang the dinner bell, he came to the back porch looking exhausted but satisfied. "Got 4 posts replaced and set," he reported, washing his hands at the pump. "The ground's hard, but the holes are deep enough to hold. I will finish the rest tomorrow and the day after, then run the wire." Sarah nodded, handing him a plate of stew and more biscuits. "You should rest during the afternoon. Heat stroke is no joke out here." "I appreciate the concern, Mrs. Coleman, but I have worked in worse. Besides, the sooner the fence is done, the sooner your cattle are safe." He took the plate and sat down on the steps again, and this time Sarah found herself sitting in the rocking chair nearby, her own plate in her lap. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the evening birds beginning their songs. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice careful. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned you lost your husband. I am sorry for your loss." Sarah's spine stiffened. "That is not your concern." "No, madam, it is not," Lucas agreed quietly. "I just wanted you to know that I understand loss. My own family, my parents and younger sister, died of fever 5 years back. I know what it is to wake up and realize the world has changed in ways you cannot undo." Sarah set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. She wanted to retreat into the house, to hide from this unexpected moment of vulnerability, but something kept her in her chair. "How did you keep going?" The question came out before she could stop it, and she immediately regretted showing such weakness. Lucas was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "I did not for a long time. I drank too much, worked jobs I did not care about, picked fights with men who did not deserve it. Then one day I woke up in a jail cell in Carson City, and the sheriff, instead of throwing me out of town, told me something I have never forgotten. He said, 'The dead do not need your suffering, son. They need your living. They need you to do the living they cannot do anymore.'" Sarah felt her throat tighten, tears threatening that she refused to let fall. "That is easier said than done." "Yes, madam, it surely is." Lucas finished his meal and stood, carrying his plate to the porch railing. "But I have found that doing the hard thing gets a little easier each time, even if it never gets easy. Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Coleman. It was the best food I have had in longer than I can remember." He walked back to the bunkhouse, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the gathering darkness. She sat there long after she should have gone inside, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Nevada sky. Thomas had loved the stars, had known all the constellations and their stories. She had not looked at them, really looked at them, since he died. Tonight she made herself find Orion, the one constellation she remembered, and she whispered into the night, "I am trying, Thomas. I am really trying." The days fell into a rhythm that surprised Sarah with its comfort. Lucas worked steadily on the fence, making visible progress each day. She found herself timing her outdoor chores to coincide with his work, close enough to observe but far enough to maintain distance. She noticed things about him, small details that accumulated into a larger picture. He was gentle with the cattle when they wandered close, always moved slowly around the chickens so as not to startle them, and he fixed things that she had not asked him to fix. A loose board on the barn door, a wobbling step on the back porch, a gate hinge that had been squeaking for months. On the fourth day, she brought water out to him in the field, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly. He was digging post holes, his shirt soaked with sweat, his hat pushed back on his head. When he saw her approaching with the water jug and cup, his face broke into a genuine smile that did something strange to Sarah's chest, a flutter she had not felt in years and was not sure she wanted to feel now. "You are a saint, Mrs. Coleman," he said, accepting the cup she poured for him. He drank deeply, then poured a second cup over his head, the water streaming down his face and neck. "Sorry, I know that is wasting water, but Lord, it felt necessary." "There's plenty in the well," Sarah said, surprised to find herself almost smiling. "You are making good progress." "Should have the last posts in by tonight, then I will spend tomorrow running the wire. After that, if you still want me around, I noticed your chicken coop could use some reinforcing. Looks like coyotes have been testing it." Sarah frowned. "I have not lost any chickens." "Not yet, but you will if those gaps are not fixed. I can do it in a day, maybe two. No extra charge, just part of the work." "That is not necessary." Lucas shrugged, setting down the cup and picking up the post hole digger again. "Maybe not, but it is the right thing to do. You have treated me fairly, Mrs. Coleman, fed me better than I have been fed in years, and given me work when plenty of other ranchers turned me away because of my limp. Let me do this small thing in return." Sarah did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded and walked back toward the house, acutely aware that he watched her for a moment before returning to his work. That night, as she prepared supper, she found herself making extra, baking a dried apple pie that she had not made since before Thomas died. It was Thomas's favorite, and the familiar motions of rolling the crust and mixing the filling brought both comfort and pain. When she brought Lucas his supper, the pie still warm from the oven, his eyes widened. "Mrs. Coleman, you did not have to do this. I made extra. It would go to waste otherwise." The lie came easily, a small defense against admitting she had made it specifically for him. Lucas accepted the slice she cut for him, and when he tasted it, he closed his eyes with an expression of such pure pleasure that Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "This is incredible," he said. "My mother used to make apple pie, but I think yours might be even better." "Do not tell her I said that, wherever she is up there." Sarah found herself sitting down again, something that had become a habit over the past few evenings. "What was your mother like?" "Strong," Lucas said immediately. "She had to be, raising 3 kids mostly on her own while my father worked long hauls driving freight wagons. She could shoot better than most men, cook a meal from almost nothing, and she never let us get away with feeling sorry for ourselves. When things got hard, she would say, 'You can sit there and cry about the storm, or you can start building a boat.' I did not appreciate that advice when I was young and stupid, but I do now. She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. Lucas finished his pie slowly, savoring each bite. "What about you, Mrs. Coleman? Did you grow up out here?" Sarah hesitated. She had spent 3 years avoiding personal conversations, keeping everyone at arm's length. But sitting here in the soft evening light, with this kind, steady man who asked nothing of her except the chance to work, she found the walls she had built cracking slightly. "I grew up in San Francisco," she said finally. "My father was a banker, my mother a teacher. They wanted me to marry someone respectable, someone in their social circle. Instead, I fell in love with Thomas Coleman, a rancher's son with big dreams and no money. We ran away together, came out here to make our own life away from their expectations and disappointment. That took courage. Or stupidity. I am still not sure which." Sarah surprised herself with the honesty. "We were happy, though, for 6 years. Thomas worked hard, saved every penny, and finally bought this land. We were going to build it into something special, a real ranch with enough cattle to make a good living. Then one day he went into town for supplies and got caught in the middle of a robbery at the bank. Wrong place, wrong time. The robbers panicked and started shooting, and Thomas was killed along with 2 other men." Lucas set down his empty plate, his expression sorrowful. "That is a hard way to lose someone." "The hardest part is the senselessness of it," Sarah said, the words pouring out now that she had started. "If he had died in a riding accident, or from illness, or even defending our home, at least there would have been some meaning to it. But to die because some desperate men wanted money, to be erased from the world for something so pointless, it made everything feel meaningless. I spent the first year after his death just angry, furious at the universe for taking him, for leaving me alone, for destroying the future we had planned. And after the first year, the anger faded into something worse. Emptiness. I realized I was just going through the motions, existing but not living. People in town, good people who meant well, kept telling me I would heal, that time would make it better. But they were wrong. Time did not heal anything. It just made the wound normal, something I carried with me always. I learned to function around it, but it never went away." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "May I tell you something, Mrs. Coleman? And please know I say this with respect, not judgment." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "I think maybe you have been confusing healing with forgetting. Healing does not mean the wound disappears or that the pain goes away completely. It means you learn to live fully despite the wound, not just around it. You are still here, still fighting to keep this ranch going, still getting up every morning even though I bet there are days you do not want to. That is not just functioning. That is surviving, and surviving takes strength most people do not have." "You do not understand," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I am not strong, I am broken. Everything that mattered to me died with Thomas. I keep this place running because I do not know what else to do, but I am just going through the motions. I am too damaged to ever be whole again, too damaged to ever feel the way I used to feel. The woman I was died with my husband." Lucas leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I do not believe that. I think you are scared, and you have every right to be scared. Life took something precious from you, and you are afraid that if you let yourself feel again, if you let yourself hope again, it will just get taken away too. But Mrs. Coleman, being damaged does not mean being broken beyond repair. Sometimes damaged hearts beat strongest when they beat together." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the porch boards. "I think that is enough conversation for one night. Thank you for your work today, Mr. Owens. Good night." She retreated into the house before he could respond, closing the door firmly and leaning against it, her heart pounding. How dare he? How dare he presume to understand what she had been through, to suggest that she was simply scared rather than genuinely incapable of moving forward? She paced the small parlor, anger and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, warring inside her. Through the window, she watched Lucas sit on the porch steps for a long time, looking up at the stars. Finally, he stood, collected the dishes, washed them at the pump with a care that made her throat tight, and walked slowly back to the bunkhouse. Sarah sank into Thomas's old chair, the one she had not been able to bring herself to get rid of, and let the tears come, hot and angry and confused. The next morning, Sarah seriously considered asking Lucas to leave as soon as the fence was finished. She could hire someone from town to fix the chicken coop, could continue managing on her own as she had been doing. It would be safer, easier, less complicated than dealing with whatever strange feelings had started growing inside her like weeds in an untended garden. But when Lucas knocked on the back door to return the clean breakfast dishes, his expression carefully neutral, she found herself unable to say the words. Instead, she heard herself saying, "The chicken coop does need work. You can start on that after you finish the fence wire today." "Yes, madam." He paused, then added quietly, "Mrs. Coleman, I apologize if I overstepped last night. It was not my place to speak so freely about personal matters. I will keep our conversation strictly professional from now on." Sarah wanted to agree, to re-establish the boundaries she had worked so hard to maintain. But instead, she surprised herself by saying, "You did not overstep. You simply said things I was not ready to hear. That is my failing, not yours." Lucas's expression softened. "It is not a failing to need time, Mrs. Coleman." "Sarah," she said suddenly. "My name is Sarah." His smile was slow and warm like sunrise over the desert. "Then please call me Lucas. Mr. Owens was my father, and I am not half the man he was, so the name does not fit well." Over the following days, something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. The conversations during meals grew longer, more personal. Lucas told her about his time working on ranches across Nevada and California, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. Sarah found herself sharing memories of her life with Thomas, and for the first time since his death, those memories brought more smiles than tears. Lucas finished the fence and moved on to repairing the chicken coop, and Sarah noticed he had been right about the coyotes. The gaps in the wire were larger than she had realized, and it was only a matter of time before she would have lost birds. She watched him work, admiring the skill and care he brought to even this simple task. One afternoon, as a rare summer rain shower drove them both to the cover of the barn, Sarah found herself standing close enough to Lucas to smell the clean scent of rain on his skin and the hay dust from the barn. They had been talking about nothing important, just easy conversation about the weather and the cattle, when he turned to look at her, and the words died in both their throats. "Sarah," he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I need to tell you something, and you can send me away after if you want, but I cannot keep working here without being honest." Her heart hammered in her chest. "What is it?" "I have come to care for you, more than I have any right to. I know you are still mourning your husband, and I know you think you are too broken to love again. But I see you, Sarah Coleman. I see your strength, your resilience, the way you keep fighting even when you are tired of fighting. I see the woman who makes pie from memory, who tends her garden with patience, who has built a life from grief and determination. And that woman, the real you, is not damaged beyond repair. You are beautiful and whole even with your scars, especially with your scars." Sarah could not breathe, could not think. Everything in her screamed to run to protect herself from the possibility of more pain. But Lucas was not Thomas. Lucas knew her as she was now, broken and scared, and he was offering something she had thought impossible, a chance to be seen and accepted, wounds and all. "I cannot promise not to hurt you," she whispered. "I cannot promise to be easy to love. I have forgotten how to let people in, how to trust that good things will not be stolen away. I am afraid all the time, Lucas. Afraid of hoping, afraid of wanting, afraid that if I let myself care about you, the universe will take you too." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid and real. "I cannot promise I will never leave, because none of us know what tomorrow holds. But I can promise that whatever time we have, I will spend it proving to you that damaged hearts can heal, especially when they beat together. You do not have to be unafraid, Sarah. You just have to be willing to try." The rain drummed on the barn roof, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo the pounding of her heart. Sarah looked at their joined hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers with such careful tenderness, and she made a choice that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I do not know how to do this," she said, her voice shaking. "I do not know how to let someone in again." "Then we will figure it out together," Lucas said. "No rush, no pressure, just two people one day at a time learning how to be whole again." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time in 3 years, they were not tears of grief but of possibility. Lucas pulled her gently into his arms, and she went, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the sound of the rain, two damaged people taking the first tentative steps toward healing. The weeks that followed were a revelation to Sarah. Lucas stayed on at the ranch, finding an endless list of repairs and improvements that needed attention, and she did not protest. They worked side by side, repairing fence line, tending the cattle, expanding the vegetable garden. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked about everything and nothing, building a friendship that slowly, carefully, deepened into something more. Lucas courted her with a patience that both frustrated and touched her. He did not push for more than she was ready to give, content with held hands and long conversations, and the occasional kiss on the cheek. When Sarah woke from nightmares about Thomas's death, she would see the light on in the bunkhouse and know that Lucas was awake too, waiting in case she needed him but respecting her space. One evening in late August, as the heat finally began breaking into cooler nights, Sarah invited Lucas into the house for the first time. It was a huge step, one that felt like both a betrayal and a new beginning. She had not allowed anyone inside since Thomas died, keeping the space as a private shrine to their life together. Lucas entered slowly, removing his hat and looking around with quiet appreciation. "You have a beautiful home, Sarah." "It was going to be our dream," she said, gesturing around the modest but well-kept interior. Thomas and I planned every detail, saved for every piece of furniture. After he died, I could not change anything. I kept thinking that if I moved things around or got rid of his belongings, it would be like erasing him completely. Lucas walked to the mantel where a photograph of Thomas sat in a wooden frame. He studied it for a long moment, then turned to Sarah with serious eyes. He was a handsome man. "You must have made a striking couple." Sarah joined him, looking at the photograph. Thomas smiled out at them, forever young and happy, captured in a moment before tragedy struck. "I loved him with everything I had," she said softly. "For a long time, I thought that meant I could never love anyone else, that giving my heart to another person would somehow diminish what Thomas and I had. And now I am starting to understand that the heart is not a finite thing. Love does not divide, it multiplies. Loving you does not mean loving Thomas less. It means I am learning to live again, to be more than just a ghost haunting the life I used to have." She turned to face Lucas fully. "He would have liked you, I think. Thomas always respected hard work and honest character. He would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone, frozen in grief." Lucas cupped her face gently in his hands. "I am not trying to replace him, Sarah. I could not even if I wanted to. But I would like to build something new with you, something that honors your past while reaching toward the future." "I want that too," Sarah said, and then she did something she had not done in years. She reached up and kissed Lucas, really kissed him, pouring into it all the hope and fear and desperate wanting that had been building inside her. He responded with matching intensity, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her close. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah Coleman, I love you. I love your strength and your vulnerability, your stubbornness and your courage. I love the way you care for your animals, the way you work until your hands blister, the way you have fought to survive when it would have been easier to give up. Will you give me the honor of courting you properly, with the intention of making you my wife if you will have me?" Sarah's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. The fear was still there, whispering warnings about loss and pain, but it was drowned out by something stronger: hope. Real, tangible hope that life could be good again, that she could be happy again, that loving Lucas did not make her a traitor to Thomas's memory, but rather a testament to the life force that Thomas would have wanted her to embrace. "Yes," she said, laughing through tears. "Yes, Lucas Owens, I will let you court me properly. I will let you love me, and I will try, God help me, I will try to love you back with all the broken pieces of my heart." "Those broken pieces are the strongest parts," Lucas said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Because they have survived the worst and kept beating. And together, Sarah, our damaged hearts will beat stronger than either could alone." They spent the evening talking about the future, making plans that felt both terrifying and thrilling. Lucas wanted to buy into the ranch as a full partner, investing his savings and labor into expanding the operation. Sarah wanted to start breeding horses, a dream she and Thomas had discussed but never acted on. Together, they mapped out possibilities, their voices overlapping with excitement and hope. That night, after Lucas reluctantly returned to the bunkhouse with promises of propriety until they were properly wed, Sarah lay in bed and felt something she had not experienced in 3 years: contentment. The grief was still there, would always be there to some degree, but it no longer consumed her entire existence. She could hold her love for Thomas and her growing love for Lucas in the same heart, and instead of tearing her apart, it made her feel more whole than she had since the day Thomas died. The town of Verde took notice when Lucas and Sarah started appearing together at Sunday services and in the general store. Mrs. Henderson, The busybody storekeeper who had first sent Lucas to Sarah's ranch beamed with pride as if she had orchestrated the entire romance. Other townspeople offered congratulations and approval, though Sarah caught a few disapproving looks from those who thought 3 years was not long enough to mourn a husband. She ignored the critics and focused on building her new life. Lucas proved to be everything he had promised and more. He was hardworking, honest, and patient with her occasional setbacks, the moments when grief would hit her unexpectedly, and she would need space to cry or simply be alone. He never took it personally, never demanded more than she could give, and slowly, steadily, Sarah found the walls around her heart crumbling. In September, Lucas asked her father to marry them, a simple ceremony in the ranch's front yard with the town's preacher officiating and a small gathering of friends from Verdi attending. Sarah wore a simple blue dress, practical and pretty, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Lucas had picked that morning. As she stood beside him, speaking vows that promised love and partnership, and forever, she felt Thomas's presence like a blessing rather than a haunting. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said, and when Lucas kissed her, Sarah felt the last pieces of her broken heart settle into place, not perfectly healed but functional and strong, ready to beat alongside Lucas's for whatever years they were granted. The wedding celebration was modest but joyful, with neighbors bringing food and music and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. Sarah found herself laughing, actually laughing, in a way she had not since before Thomas died. Lucas never left her side, his hand always finding hers, his eyes constantly seeking her out in the crowd with an expression of such love that it made her breathless. As the guests finally departed and the newlyweds were left alone, Lucas carried Sarah over the threshold of her house, their house now, and set her down gently in the parlor. The photograph of Thomas still sat on the mantel, and Sarah was grateful that Lucas had never asked her to remove it. "He is part of your story," Lucas had said when she mentioned it. "I would never ask you to erase any chapter of your life, even the painful ones. They made you who you are, and I love who you are." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered endearments and careful explorations, two people learning each other's bodies and hearts with reverence and patience. Afterward, lying in Lucas's arms, Sarah felt a peace she had thought impossible. This was different from what she had shared with Thomas, not better or worse, just different, and that was okay. She was different now, too, shaped by loss and hardship into someone stronger and more resilient. "Are you happy?" Lucas asked softly, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I am," Sarah said, surprised by the truth of it. "I did not think I could be happy again, not really happy, but I am, Lucas. You have given me back my life." "You gave yourself back your life," he corrected. "I just had the privilege of being here to witness it." "You are the strongest woman I have ever known, Sarah Owens." Sarah Owens. The new name felt strange and right at the same time, another sign of her transformation from the grief-stricken widow into someone capable of hope and joy. She fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, dreaming of the future instead of being haunted by the past. The following months brought changes that Sarah embraced rather than feared. Lucas proved to be a natural horseman, and together they purchased their first breeding pair of horses from a ranch in California, a beautiful mare and a strong stallion with good bloodlines. The investment was risky, using most of their combined savings, but Sarah felt confident in a way she had not felt since Thomas's death. The cattle operation expanded as well, with Lucas's hard work and business sense complementing Sarah's caution and attention to detail. They hired 2 ranch hands for the busy seasons, young men from town who needed work and were willing to learn. Sarah found herself taking on a mentoring role, teaching them the same skills Thomas had taught her years ago. And in doing so, she honored his memory while building toward her future. Winter came, cold and harsh as Nevada winters could be, but Sarah faced it without fear. She was not alone anymore, would never be alone again in the way she had been. When storms raged and temperatures plummeted, she had Lucas beside her, working together to protect their livestock and keep their home warm. The bunkhouse became storage for hay and equipment, no longer needed for housing. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke to find Lucas already up, stoking the fire and preparing coffee. He turned when he heard her stirring, his face breaking into that smile that never failed to warm her from the inside out. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Owens," he said, pulling her into his arms for a long kiss. "Merry Christmas," she replied, content to stand there in his embrace while the coffee percolated and the fire crackled. "I have something for you." She retrieved a package from its hiding place and handed it to him, watching nervously as he unwrapped the heavy wool coat she had spent months making in secret, stitching by lamplight after he fell asleep. Lucas's expression when he saw it made all the late nights and pricked fingers worthwhile. "Sarah, this is incredible," he said, running his hands over the careful stitching and warm fabric. "You made this. You needed a good winter coat, and I wanted to make you something special. Try it on." The coat fit perfectly, and Lucas looked so handsome in it that Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. He pulled her close, the new coat warm between them. "I love it, and I love you, more than I have words to express." "I love you too," Sarah said, and the words came easily now, without the guilt and fear that had accompanied them in the beginning. "I never thought I would say that to someone again, but you have shown me that the heart's capacity for love is infinite. Thank you for being patient with me, for seeing past my damage to the person I could become." "You were always that person," Lucas said. "You just needed someone to believe it until you could believe it yourself. Now I have something for you too." He led her to the parlor, where a beautiful wooden box sat on the table, clearly handmade with incredible skill. Sarah opened it to find a complete set of wood carving tools nestled in individual compartments, the handles polished smooth and the blades sharp and gleaming. "You mentioned once that your father taught you to carve when you were young," Lucas explained. "I thought maybe you would like to try it again. I made the box, but the tools I ordered from a craftsman in San Francisco. If you do not want them, if the memory is too painful, I can—" Sarah cut him off with a kiss. "They are perfect. I had forgotten how much I loved carving, how peaceful it made me feel. My father and I used to make small animals and figures together, and after my mother died when I was 15, it was how we processed our grief. I stopped when I married Thomas because there was always so much work to do, but I would like to start again. Thank you, Lucas." They spent Christmas Day in comfortable domesticity, cooking together, exchanging small gifts, and simply enjoying each other's company. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah picked up one of the carving tools and a piece of scrap wood and began to shape it, her hands remembering the motions her father had taught her years ago. Lucas watched with interest, and soon they were talking about his childhood, her childhood, weaving together their separate histories into a shared narrative. As winter gave way to spring of 1879, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The realization brought a complicated mix of joy, fear, and grief. She had wanted children with Thomas, but it had never happened in their 6 years of marriage. Now she would have a child with Lucas, and while part of her was thrilled, another part felt guilty, as if this pregnancy was somehow another betrayal of her first husband. Lucas found her crying in the barn one afternoon, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. He sat beside her in the hay, saying nothing, just offering his presence until she was ready to talk. "I am happy about the baby," Sarah finally said. "I truly am. But I feel like I am leaving Thomas behind completely now, creating a whole new life that has nothing to do with the one we built together. And I know that is stupid because he is gone and has been gone for 4 years now, but it still feels like I am abandoning him." Lucas took her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "You are not abandoning anyone, Sarah. You are living, which is exactly what Thomas would want for you. The love you shared with him is not diminished by the love we share now or by the child we are bringing into the world. If anything, I think the fact that you can love again, that you can create new life after experiencing such loss, is a testament to what you and Thomas had. He loved you enough to want you to be happy, even without him." "How do you always know exactly what to say?" Sarah asked, wiping her eyes. "Because I love you, and because I understand grief. I told you once that damaged hearts beat strongest when they beat together. This baby is proof of that, Sarah. Our child will be born from love that survived loss, from two people who refuse to let pain be the final word in their stories. That is something powerful and beautiful." Sarah leaned against him, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. "You are going to be an amazing father, and you are going to be an incredible mother. This child is so lucky to have you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Sarah found that her body knew what to do even as her mind worried endlessly about all the things that could go wrong. Lucas was attentive without being overbearing, taking on more of the physical ranch work as her belly grew, hiring additional help when needed, and generally ensuring that Sarah could rest when she needed to rest. The town women rallied around her as well, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and the kind of community support that Sarah had resisted for so long, but now accepted gratefully. Mrs. Henderson threw her a baby celebration in the back room of the general store, and Sarah found herself surrounded by women sharing birth stories and parenting wisdom, laughing and eating cake and feeling, for the first time since moving to Verdi, like she truly belonged. In November 1879, after a long labor that tested Sarah's strength and courage, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Lucas held his son with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, and when he looked at Sarah, the love in his eyes was so profound that she felt it like a physical force. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered. "You are amazing. Sarah, you are the strongest person I have ever known." They named him Thomas Lucas Owens, honoring both the past and the future. When Sarah held her son for the first time, she felt something click into place, a sense of rightness that had been missing from her life for so long. This was what healing looked like, not forgetting the past but building on it, not replacing lost love but expanding her heart to hold more. In a moment of profound peace, Sarah looked at the photograph of Thomas that Lucas had moved to the bedroom and she whispered, "Thank you for loving me enough to let me go. Thank you for the years we had. I will tell our son about you, about how brave and good you were. You will not be forgotten." The baby stirred in her arms, and Lucas sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that for a long time. A family, damaged and healed and stronger for having survived the breaking. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the normal rhythms of ranch life and family. Thomas Lucas grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's determination and his father's kind heart. Sarah taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, and Lucas taught him to care for the horses with patience and respect. The boy heard stories about both his namesakes, about grandfather Thomas, who had died before he was born but whose legacy lived on in the ranch they still operated, and about grandfather Owens, who had died of fever but whose wisdom about damaged hearts beating together had saved his parents. In 1881, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Lily Rose, who had her father's easy smile and her mother's fierce independence. The ranch continued to prosper, the horse breeding program becoming successful enough that buyers came from as far as California and Oregon to purchase their stock. The cattle operation remained stable, providing steady income that allowed them to save for the children's future. Sarah never forgot Thomas, her first husband, but the grief that had once consumed her became something gentler, a sweet melancholy that visited occasionally but no longer controlled her life. She carved a wooden figure of him from memory, a small statue that sat on the mantel beside his photograph, and she told her children stories about him so that they would know the man whose name and legacy they carried. Lucas proved to be everything he had promised and more, a partner in every sense of the word. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good years, and supported each other through difficult ones. Their love, born from brokenness and nurtured with patience, grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1884, Lucas surprised Sarah with a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation since marrying. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, whose grown daughters helped watch them, and spent a week in the city where Sarah had grown up. She showed Lucas the house where she had lived, the school where her mother had taught, and they stood together outside the bank where Thomas had died. "I used to hate this place," Sarah said, looking at the bank's impressive facade. "I blamed it for taking him from me. But standing here now, I realize that this place did not take Thomas. Circumstance did, random chance, the unpredictability of life. And while that is still painful, it is also freeing. It means that loving you, building our life together, having our children, none of that was a betrayal. It was just life continuing to unfold the way it unfolds, sometimes tragic and sometimes beautiful, often both at once." Lucas pulled her close, right there on the San Francisco street with people passing by and cable cars clanging. "You have come so far, Sarah. I am so proud of you, so honored to be your husband and the father of your children. You took your broken heart and made it whole again, not by ignoring the cracks but by filling them with gold, like those Japanese potters do with broken pottery. The repair becomes part of the beauty." "We did it together," Sarah corrected. "You showed me that damaged hearts could beat stronger together. You were right, Lucas. You were right about everything." They spent the rest of their trip enjoying the city's restaurants and theaters, staying in a nice hotel and pretending, just for a few days, that they were wealthy city folk, rather than ranchers with dirt permanently under their fingernails. But when the week ended, Sarah was eager to get home, to see her children and her horses and the land she had come to love. San Francisco was her past, but Verde was her present and future. The years continued to roll forward, bringing changes and challenges. In 1887, a third child arrived, another boy they named Daniel, who was quiet and thoughtful where his older brother was boisterous and bold. The ranch expanded to include more acreage purchased from a retiring neighbor, and the Owens family became well respected in Verde and throughout the region. Sarah watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that time was passing too quickly. Thomas Lucas, the eldest, showed an interest in horse training that delighted both his parents. Lily Rose was fierce and independent, declaring at age 6 that she would run the ranch someday and nobody could stop her. Daniel, the baby, was gentle with the animals and showed an artistic bent, spending hours watching his mother carve and eventually learning the craft himself. Lucas's hair began showing threads of silver, and Sarah found laugh lines appearing around her eyes. They were aging together, building a lifetime of shared memories and experiences. The trauma of Sarah's first husband's death had become integrated into her story rather than defining it entirely. She had learned that healing did not mean forgetting, and that love did not diminish through division but multiplied through addition. On a warm evening in the summer of 1892, Sarah and Lucas sat on the porch they had repaired together so many years ago, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas Lucas, now 12, was teaching Lily, 10, how to rope fence posts while Daniel, 5, attempted to carve a stick with the small tools his mother had given him. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Staying here with me instead of moving on to somewhere else, maybe finding someone without all my complications and damage." Lucas turned to her with surprise. "Not for a single moment. You are the love of my life, Sarah." "Yes, you came with complications and pain, but you also came with strength and resilience and a capacity for love that took my breath away. Our life together has been everything I could have hoped for and more." "I was so convinced I was too broken to love again," Sarah said, shaking her head at her younger self. "I wasted so much time being afraid, hiding behind my grief like it was armor that could protect me from more pain. You were not wasting time. You were healing. And when you were ready, you took the chance on us, on me, on yourself. That took more courage than most people ever have to show." Lucas reached for her hand, their fingers interlacing in the familiar, comfortable way of long partnership. "Besides, I told you from the beginning, damaged hearts beat strongest when they beat together. We proved that true, you and I." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink. "Yes," she agreed softly. "Yes, we did." The children's laughter drifted across the yard, mixing with the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance and horses moving in their pastures. The ranch was thriving, the family was healthy and happy, and Sarah felt a contentment so deep it seemed to radiate from her bones. The girl who had run away from San Francisco with Thomas Coleman all those years ago could never have imagined this future. The widow who had stood broken and alone after his death could never have believed healing was possible. But the woman she had become, tempered by loss and strengthened by love, knew that life's tragedies did not have to be the end of the story. As the stars began appearing one by one in the vast western sky, Sarah thought about the journey she had taken from despair to hope, from brokenness to wholeness. It had not been easy, had required courage she did not know she possessed, and faith she had to build from fragments. But sitting here with Lucas, watching their children play, knowing that tomorrow would bring more of this peaceful, ordinary, extraordinary life they had built together, Sarah understood something fundamental about the human heart. Damage did not make you weak. Surviving the damage made you strong. And when two people who understood that truth found each other and chose each other despite their scars, or perhaps because of them, they created something unbreakable. Their love was not naive or untested. It had been forged in the fires of loss and hardship, and it had emerged stronger and truer than love that had never been challenged. "I love you," Sarah said, the words as easy and natural as breathing. "I love you too," Lucas replied. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days we are given." They sat like that until the children finally tired themselves out and came running up to the porch, demanding dinner and attention. Sarah rose to feed her family, her heart full of gratitude for second chances and new beginnings, for cowboys who saw through walls of grief to the woman waiting to be found, for damaged hearts that learned to beat together. The years continued their steady march forward, bringing with them the inevitable changes and challenges of life. By 1895, Thomas Lucas was a young man of 15, working the ranch alongside his father with skill and pride. He was courting a girl from town, Emily Watson, the schoolteacher's daughter, and Sarah watched their tentative young love with bittersweet recognition of her own youth. She gave her son advice drawn from experience, telling him that love required patience and honesty and the courage to be vulnerable. Lily Rose, at 13, was every bit as fierce as she had promised to be as a child. She could outride most of the ranch hands and had opinions about every aspect of the operation, which she shared loudly and frequently. Lucas loved her spirit, while Sarah worked to channel it into productive directions. Daniel, now 8, remained the quiet one, often found sketching the horses or carving small figures with increasing skill. Sarah recognized in him her own creative soul, and she nurtured it carefully, knowing that artistic temperaments needed protection in the harsh practical world of ranching. In 1897, the Owens family faced their first major crisis since Sarah and Lucas had married. A drought struck Nevada, severe and prolonged, threatening their water supply and forcing them to make difficult decisions about their livestock. Many of their neighbors lost entire herds, and some families were forced to sell their land and move on. Sarah, remembering the hardships she had endured alone after Thomas's death, rallied their family and workers with determination. "We have faced hard times before and survived," she told Lucas and their oldest son as they planned water rationing and feed conservation strategies. "We will survive this too. The Owens family does not give up." Lucas looked at her with such love and admiration that even after 18 years of marriage, she felt her heart flutter. "We survive because of you, Sarah. Your strength has always been the foundation of this family." "No," Sarah corrected. "We survive because we are together. Alone, I would have given up long ago. But together, we are stronger than any drought or hardship. Damaged hearts beating together, remember." They made it through that difficult year by working harder than ever, by making sacrifices and tough choices, and by supporting each other through the stress and worry. When the rains finally came in the spring of 1898, Sarah stood in the muddy yard and cried with relief, Lucas's arms around her as their children whooped and danced in the downpour. That same year brought joy to balance the previous year's hardship. Thomas Lucas married Emily Watson in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Verdi, and Sarah watched her son pledge himself to his young wife with tears streaming down her face. Lucas handed her his handkerchief, whispering, "He learned about love from the best example possible." "We taught him together," Sarah replied, squeezing her husband's hand. "Everything good in our children comes from both of us." In 1899, the new century approaching like a promise of fresh starts, Sarah received word that her father had died in San Francisco. She had not seen him since running away with Thomas over 20 years ago. Though they had exchanged occasional letters, once her anger at his disapproval had faded. The news hit harder than she expected, bringing with it complicated feelings about family and forgiveness and time lost that could never be reclaimed. Lucas insisted on accompanying her to San Francisco for the funeral, leaving the ranch in Thomas Lucas and Emily's capable hands. The trip was somber but necessary, and Sarah found closure she had not realized she needed. Standing at her father's grave, she told him about her life, about losing Thomas and finding Lucas, about their 3 children and successful ranch. She forgave him for not understanding her choices, and she hoped, wherever he was, that he forgave her too. "Family is complicated," Lucas said as they prepared to return home. "But love is simple. You loved your father despite your differences, just like he loved you. That is what matters in the end." The turn of the century in 1900 felt momentous and strange, like the whole world was holding its breath before plunging into unknown future. Sarah was 41 years old, Lucas 44, and they had been married for nearly 21 years. Their children were growing up, the ranch was stable and successful, and they had weathered every storm together. One evening, as they sat in their familiar spots on the porch, Sarah looked at Lucas and marveled at how much life they had shared. His hair was more silver than brown now, his face weathered by years of outdoor work, but to her, he was as handsome as the day he had ridden up to her ranch looking for work. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, catching her staring. "I am thinking about that day you showed up here, young and hopeful and so patient with a bitter widow who thought she was too damaged to ever be whole again. I am thinking about how you saw something in me that I could not see in myself. I am thinking about how grateful I am that you did not give up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." Lucas smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes in the way she loved. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were worth waiting for, worth fighting for. You had not given up on yourself, Sarah, no matter how much you thought you had. You were still standing, still working, still surviving. All I did was remind you that surviving could become living if you let it. You did so much more than that," Sarah said. "You taught me that love does not make you weak or vulnerable. It makes you strong. You showed me that my damaged heart was not a liability but a testament to my capacity for deep feeling. You proved that two broken people could create something whole and beautiful together." As the stars emerged overhead, the same stars she had looked at in despair so many years ago, Sarah reflected on the journey she had taken. From a young woman in love running away to make her own life, to a widow convinced she was too broken to ever be happy again, to a wife and mother and successful rancher who had learned that healing was possible, that love could be found more than once, that damaged hearts truly did beat strongest when they beat together. In 1902, Lily Rose married a young veterinarian who had moved to Verde from Oregon, and Sarah gained another daughter-in-law who shared her fierce independence and strong opinions. They clashed sometimes, but also understood each other in ways that created a deep respect. Daniel, showing no interest in marriage yet at 15, talked about maybe studying art in San Francisco someday, and Sarah encouraged him, knowing that not all her children needed to stay on the ranch to honor what she and Lucas had built. By 1905, Sarah and Lucas had 3 grandchildren, all from Thomas Lucas and Emily, with another on the way. Watching her son be a father filled Sarah with profound satisfaction. He was good at it, patient and loving, and she could see both Thomas Coleman and Lucas Owens in the way he parented. Her first husband's legacy lived on through the grandson who bore his name, and her second husband's lessons about love and patience had been passed down to another generation. On their 26th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Sarah with something she had not expected. He had commissioned a skilled craftsman to create a wooden sign for the ranch entrance with letters carved deep and painted gold, Coleman Owens Ranch. Established 1873, Sarah stood looking at it, tears streaming down her face. "You put Thomas's name on it." "Of course I did," Lucas said, his arm around her waist. "This ranch was his dream too, his legacy. Our children carry his name as much as mine. It would be wrong to erase that history. Everything we have built stands on the foundation that you and Thomas laid together. I am honored to have my name alongside his." Sarah turned and kissed her husband with all the love and gratitude in her heart. After 26 years, his kisses still made her knees weak, still filled her with warmth and safety and belonging. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" she whispered. "We found each other," Lucas corrected. And we built this life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. That is not luck, Sarah. That is determination and love and refusing to let past pain dictate future happiness." As they walked back to the house, Sarah looked around at everything they had created. The expanded barn and stables, the well-maintained fences, the vegetable garden that now included fruit trees, the chicken coop that had been rebuilt twice over the years, the bunkhouse that housed their ranch hands, and the main house that had been added onto as their family grew. All of it represented years of hard work and partnership, but more than that, it represented the healing journey of two damaged hearts that had found each other and chosen to beat together. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable mixture of joy and sorrow that makes up a full life. In 1908, Daniel left for San Francisco to attend art school, and though Sarah missed him terribly, she was proud of his courage in pursuing his passion. Thomas, Lucas, and Emily took over more of the daily ranch operations as Lucas and Sarah began, slowly and reluctantly, to step back from the hardest physical labor. Lily Rose and her husband built a house on the far end of the property and started their own horse training business, working in partnership with the main ranch. In 1912, Sarah and Lucas celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Sarah was 53 years old, Lucas 56, and they had been together longer than she had been without him. The photograph of Thomas Coleman still sat on the mantel, but beside it now were dozens of other photographs, chronicling the life she had built after his death. She no longer felt guilt when she looked at his young, frozen face. Instead, she felt gratitude for the time they had shared and peace with the life she had created since. "You think he would be proud?" she asked Lucas quietly that evening as they sat on their porch in the familiar, comfortable silence of long marriage. Lucas did not need to ask who she meant. "I think he would be amazed and proud beyond measure. You took the foundation he helped you build and created an empire. You raised children who are good and strong and kind. You survived losing him and found the courage to love again. Of course, he would be proud. How could he be anything else?" Sarah nodded, satisfied with that answer. She had spent so many years worried about betraying Thomas's memory, but she finally, fully understood that living well was the best tribute she could offer him. By healing, by loving Lucas, by building this family and this ranch into something that would last beyond her own lifetime, she honored both the man she had lost and the man who had helped her find herself again. In 1915, Sarah and Lucas decided to officially retire from active ranch management, turning over the operation to Thomas Lucas while maintaining their residence on the property. It was strange at first, not being in charge of every decision, but also freeing. They had time to travel, taking trips to places they had never seen, and time to simply enjoy each other's company without the constant pressure of work. One afternoon, sitting by the creek that ran through their property, Sarah said, "You know what I have realized? I am not that broken widow anymore. Somewhere along the way, without really noticing, I became someone new. Not the girl I was with Thomas, and not the damaged woman you first met, but someone entirely different. Someone who contains all of those previous versions but is more than their sum." Lucas smiled, tossing a pebble into the creek. "You have always been becoming, Sarah. That is what makes you so remarkable. You never let yourself stay static, never let grief be the final word in your story. You kept growing and changing and choosing life, even when it would have been easier to choose stagnation. I could not have done it without you. Maybe not, but I could not have done it without you either. You think I saved you, but you saved me just as much." Before I met you, I was drifting, working job to job, not really building toward anything. You gave me purpose, a reason to plant roots and dream about the future. We saved each other, Sarah. That is what damaged hearts do when they beat together. They heal each other. Sarah leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder, listening to the water ripple over stones and feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun. She thought about the long journey from the day Thomas died to this moment of peace and contentment. It had not been easy, had required more strength and courage than she knew she possessed, but she had made it. They had made it together, and that made all the difference. The years that followed were gentler, a reward perhaps for the hardships they had endured earlier in life. Sarah took up painting, inspired by Daniel's artistic success, and discovered she had a talent for capturing the Nevada landscape in watercolors. Lucas spent his time training horses, working with the younger generation but at his own pace, sharing a lifetime of accumulated knowledge. They traveled when the mood struck them, visited Daniel in San Francisco, and doted on their growing collection of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In 1920, Sarah and Lucas celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. It was a small, quiet affair, just the two of them having dinner in the house where they had built their life together. Sarah was 61 years old, Lucas 64, and they had been together for more than 4 decades. 41 years, Sarah marveled, looking at her husband across the table. When you rode up to my ranch that day in 1878, could you have imagined this? I imagined something, Lucas admitted. Maybe not exactly this, but I knew from the moment I saw you that my life was about to change in ways I could not predict. I knew I wanted to be part of your story, whatever that story became. And I thought I had no more story left to tell, Sarah said, shaking her head at her younger self. I thought Thomas's death had written the ending, but it turned out to be just the end of one chapter. You helped me start the next chapter, Lucas. You showed me that my story was not finished, just taking a turn I had not expected. They raised their glasses of wine, a rare indulgence, and Lucas offered a toast. To damaged hearts that healed together. To love that was patient enough to wait and strong enough to last. To the best 41 years of my life, and to however many more we are blessed to share. To us, Sarah agreed, clinking her glass against his. To surviving and thriving and proving that broken things can become beautiful. That night, lying in bed with Lucas's arms around her, Sarah thought about all the versions of herself she had been over the decades. The young bride full of hope, the devastated widow convinced she would never be whole again, the cautious woman learning to trust and love once more, the mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother who had built a legacy that would outlast her. All of those women lived inside her still, layers of experience and growth that had accumulated into the person she was now. She thought about Thomas Coleman, her first love, whose death had nearly destroyed her. She hoped, wherever he was, that he knew she had survived, had thrived even, and that she had never forgotten him despite building a new life. She thought about Lucas Owens, the cowboy who had shown up looking for work and stayed to help her rebuild her broken heart. He had been patient when she needed patience, strong when she needed strength, and loving always, even when she convinced herself she did not deserve love. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Lucas murmured, half asleep. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible to myself. For believing I could heal when I had given up hope. For loving me despite my damage, or maybe because of it. For building this life with me. For 41 years of being the best partner I could have asked for." Lucas pulled her closer, his lips brushing her temple. "It has been my honor and privilege, Sarah Owens. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat, damaged hearts and all." Sarah smiled in the darkness, feeling more content and at peace than she had ever thought possible when she was that broken widow so many years ago. Lucas's words from that day in the barn, spoken during a summer rainstorm that felt like a lifetime ago, echoed in her mind. Damaged hearts beat strongest when they beat together. He had been right then, and he remained right now. Together, they had taken their individual brokenness and forged something unbreakable. A love that had lasted through decades and trials and would last, she knew, until their final heartbeats. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last thought was of gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for cowboy wisdom, for the resilience of the human heart, and for the extraordinary life she had built from the ashes of tragedy. She had been convinced she was too damaged to ever be whole again, but Lucas had shown her the truth. Being damaged did not make her weak or broken beyond repair. It made her strong, resilient, capable of a depth of love and appreciation that only comes from knowing what it means to lose everything and still find the courage to try again. Their story, the story of Sarah Coleman Owens and Lucas Owens, was not a fairy tale where love solved all problems and erased all pain. It was something better and truer. It was a story of real people with real wounds who chose each other anyway, who worked every day to build something lasting, who proved that love was not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone whose damage fit with yours in a way that made both people stronger. It was a story about healing, hope, and the extraordinary power of two hearts that, despite being broken, found a way to beat together.